Advanced English Arabic Learning Phrasal Verbs, Session 03. She was called Rose after her late grandmother. I called around but she wasn't in, visit. I must call her back when we get to the office. The opposition party called for the minister's resignation after the scandal broke. I'll call for a cab right away. An emergency like this calls for some pretty drastic action. The protests called forth a strong reaction from the police. We had to call in a plumber because the sink was leaking. I called in on Jenny on my way home. The concert had to be called off, cancel. Call off your lawyers, we can work something out. The president called on the wealthy countries for financial aid. As we were in the area, we called on my sister. He's planning to call on Catherine today. We are able to call on academic staff with a wide variety of expertise. He called on the government to hold a vote. I now call on the other party to give their account of what happened. He called them out over awarding contracts to family members. I called round on my way home but no one was in. The army called up the reserve soldiers when the war broke out, summon. I called him up as soon as I got to a phone to tell him the news, telephoned. The airport taxes cancelled out the savings we had made on the flight tickets. She capped off the meeting with a radical proposal. The team got carried away when they won. I got a bit carried away when describing the final game. They carried forward their losses to the next financial year. They hope the new management will be able to carry the project forward. She carried off the first prize in the competition. Cancer carried him off a couple of years ago. Carry on quietly with your work until the substitute teacher arrives. The children annoyed me by carrying on all morning. They carry on in a very adult fashion. She carried on watching the TV. I knew I was going the wrong way, but I just carried on. He could not carry on a logical conversation. She was carrying on with young Adam. He's been carrying on with someone at work for years, have an affair. The government is carrying out tests on growing genetically modified crops. I'm too tired to cook, let's get a carry-out. The meeting carried over into the afternoon. They carried the reforms through despite the opposition. The police carted them off to question them. The thieves carted off all the receipts. She's carved out a career in photojournalism. The carve-up of the brewing industry by vested interests. West Africa was carved up by the Europeans. They carved the company up and sold a lot off. I had to carve up a Volvo in order to follow him. The idiot carved us up and forced me to brake hard. I'm staying at home and chilling out this evening. They cashed in their bonds and spent the money on a holiday. The opposition party are cashing in on the government's unpopularity. A hacker got my credit card details from my computer and cashed out a lot of money. After winning, she cashed out her chips. After the shop closed, they have to cash up before they can go home. I chickened out of the bungee jumping. They're casting about for support. She was casting around for people to help her. He cast her aside. They cast off any semblance of politeness and attacked us viciously. You told me your family had cast you off. The boatman cast off and rowed down river. The king cast off his hawk at the antelope. The ferry cast off and made a beeline for the pier. They cast off and headed out to sea. They cast him out because of his behavior. He returned home 3 years after being cast away on the island. The rubbish was cast up by the tide. She would collect objects cast up by the tides. The college caters for students of all ages. The scheme caters for interest rate fluctuations. Many farmers cater to those who buy in bulk. A seaside resort catering for older holidaymakers. The film caters to the audience's worst instincts. She caught at my sleeve as I was leaving. The idea of linking pay to performance has caught on. Many critics were shocked when techno caught on in the clubs. I caught on to what it was the guy was saying. It took Henry ages to catch on. The exam is designed to catch you out. You might get caught out by the weather. His tone suggested he'd caught her out in some misdemeanor. He caught me out when he checked my story with my previous employer. We were caught out in the storm. He normally used the afternoons to catch up on paperwork. I was ill for a fortnight and now I've got to catch up on the work I missed. You go with Tess and I'll catch you up. He stopped and waited for Lily to catch up. He started well, but I caught him up on the third lap. The tourists were caught up in the violence of the revolution. I'm going home to catch up on my sleep. I hadn't seen her for years, so we spent the afternoon catching up on old times. It's always good to catch up with old friends. I'm going home to catch up with my sleep. I caught up with her at the conference. His criminal behavior is starting to catch up with him. The tax authorities caught up with me for not submitting my tax returns. She caught up her jacket and bag and walked to the door. He had no desire to be caught up in political activities. My mother's trying to catch up with computers. The roof caved in because of the weight of the snow. The tunnel walls caved in. The management refused to cave into their demands. The government has refused to cave in despite the protests. I chanced upon a very rare book in car boot sale. The Irish changed over to using kilometers in 2005. The press chased us down when the story broke. The dog chased her postal worker off. The librarian is chasing me up about my overdue books. I chased her up as she hadn't paid for several months. I didn't get a reply, so I have been chasing them up. He spent the whole night chatting her up. She cheated on me with my friend. I hate him. He cheated me out of £100. We checked by the office to see if the stuff was ready. They checked into at the Ritz yesterday. She checked off the candidates' names as they arrived. She checked out and took a cab to the airport. She checked out last week, the funeral's tomorrow. I checked the new restaurant out as soon as it opened. We checked the contract over before signing it. They cheered their team on throughout the match. Come on, cheer up, it isn't all bad, you know. The dog chewed off the man's face. I'll chew on it, sleep on it for a day or two. They chewed him out for being late. He asked for a few days to chew the matter over. The puppy chewed up the newspaper. The video chewed my tape up. I'd like to chime in because I think it's a good idea. They have been chipping away at his reputation ever since he took office. Everybody chipped in to pay the bill. If I could chip in, there are a couple of issues I'd like to raise. These guerrilla attacks are choking off our food shipments. Water hyacinth is choking out the native vegetation in our rivers. He choked up during his retirement speech. He choked up on the bat and hit the ball better. They chopped down most of the forest and now it looks like a desert. I chopped up the vegetables for the soup. Dinner's ready, chow down. We're going to chow down on Chow King restaurant. They make a living out of stuff people chuck away. I chucked away all my old records years ago. I chucked my job in to go traveling. I chucked out some stuff I found in the fridge that had gone bad. He got ridiculously drunk and chucked up in the back of the minicab, vomit, threw up. The government churns out educational policies every few months. Artists continued to churn out uninteresting works. Everybody clammed up when the principal entered. The thief clammed up when he was taken for interrogation by the police. She clams up every time I walk in, it is worrisome, shuts up. The government are clamping down on antisocial behavior. The authorities have also clamped down on public demonstrations. The new tax will claw back what the government has given out in grants. The opposition parties are trying to claw back the voters they lost. They are clawing back their market share. The morning started bright and warm, but it clouded over around midday. The end. Coming next. Session 04.